Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime and Entertainment. We have here a very, very interesting guest with us today. Former undercover ATF agent Lou Valusi is on the show. Lou, how you doing, my friend?
Good, man. Happy to be here. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, brother.
Hey, man, the pleasure's all mine. We're glad you can make it. Now, unfortunately, you're the second ATF. Well, actually, Susie, you're the third ATF agent we've had. But I got a feeling your stories are going to be right up there with the best of them. We had on Jay Dobbins, and then we had on a guy by the name of Ignacio Esteban, who had done like 25 years ATF. He's written some books. And I had actually seen your name a while back when I was doing some research. And then through another friend of ours, Brian Whitney, he mentioned your name. And I said, I want to get that guy on the show. I've seen some of his stuff, and you definitely have some interesting stories. So that's what we're here for today. I guess we'll just kind of start from the top because nobody's born an ATF agent. You get there through certain things. So kind of tell us a little bit about where you grew up. Did you have plans to be a cop, or how that came into the fold?
I did not, man. It was not even on a radar for me. I was one of those directionless, clueless kids growing up. I didn't even think about what I wanted to do. I got a football. I grew up in New York, and I got a football scholarship to play Division I AA ball at Lafayette College in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And not exactly a pipeline to the NFL or nothing like that. So a tough academic school, and I barely made it through, not really taking too much serious about my student career. And I graduated with a degree in economics and business, and really didn't know much about either. And like a GPA of about 2.2, I think. And I got out, and I had no clue, man. No clue what I wanted to do. And so I took a job at a bank in New York, making like $8 an hour, just reading computer printouts and putting them in files in a room with no windows. And I hated it. So one day I got a phone call from a guy I had played ball with, and he had invited me down he was at his brother's apartment in the Bronx, and he invited me down, and I'd never met his brother. And this guy, so I go down there and we're drinking a beer, and this guy pulls up and he's driving a Corvette, and he's Italian, and he's got the long hair. He's got a Beretta 92F in his waistband. And he comes in, and he introduces me, and we start talking and having a beer. And it turns out he's an undercover agent working for DEA. And this is at the time when they were down in Panama doing stuff, and he had been down in Panama, and we talked for maybe a half hour. And that was it for me. I was hooked. I found my direction. I knew where I wanted to go. So, but that's fun.
Well, growing up in the Bronx, did you see a lot of, huh?
I didn't grow up there. I grew up upstate.
Okay.
I was north of there. I just drove down. Yeah.
Okay, because I was about to say you probably had a lot of the organized crime element around there. I know you said the guy you seen was Italian, but the Bronx has got a lot of crime up in that way too, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was all over New York. But just the idea of working undercover really appealed to me. So, I didn't want to be a uniform cop.
Right.
But, you don't just like get a job. You don't just start working undercover.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. I know that there's some steps you have to take to get there. There's some, a path, so to speak. Tell us a little bit about that, how you started, and then what kind of prepped you to get to your undercover stage.
Well, I took all the tests. Back then there was, for the Treasury enforcement exam, and all the tests for all the federal agencies. And the one advantage I did have was I was so fresh out of college, I was still in test taking mode. Mm-hmm. And I scored really high. And I got a call from INS, what's now called ICE. Back then it was INS, right. Out in Los Angeles. And they called me up for an interview. I didn't even own a suit. So my dad, we went down to the garment district and had some tailor make me a cheap $300 suit. And I borrowed money from my dad for a airplane ticket and jumped on a plane to LA. And went through the interview. I tucked my long hair in the back of my collar and went into the interview. And again, I say this a lot. I think I did good in the interview because I didn't know what I was doing, right? I wasn't nervous because I was clueless. Okay. So a week later, I get a phone call offering me a job as a special agent with INS. I said, man, where do I sign? And they did my background check. And the next thing you knew, I was down at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center down in Brunswick, Georgia.
Wow.
Going through the 4 months INS Special Agent Academy. And, so they threw me out there on the streets of LA, and it was, what a great time to be a cop, man. In the early 90s, 1991 in Los Angeles. I mean, the gang problem, the violence, it was out of control. If you were a young guy and you were looking for action, that was a place to be. I was out there during the riots. I worked the streets during the riots.
Was this the Rodney King riots? The what riot? What?
Rodney King.
Rodney King. Okay.
1992.
Yeah.
So we were out there. I was in the gang unit, anti-smuggling, doing human trafficking. Then I was in the gang unit. And, these gangs, these Central American gangs, they were bringing a level of violence to Los Angeles and to some of the other big cities that our gangs wouldn't even think of, right? Like the Bloods and the Crips, they were nothing compared to, the MS-13, who we were working back then in the early 90s. No one knew who they were back then. In LA, I mean, some of these Central American and the Mexican gangs, 18th Street and Florencia Trece and MS-13, the El Salvadorian gang. I saw some brutal things that were happening. Their level of violence was like nothing I had ever seen. And, I was able to do good and excel. There was no undercover work for me to do, but I landed on a task force, and it was a LAPD, ATF, and INS task force in the Rampart division, which was a notorious division out there.
Yeah,
in
the
LA.
Rampart scandal and all that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was out there during those years.
Didn't they have like a crew of cops or something like that? They had a name for them that was doing like
Yeah, they got in a bunch of trouble.
Yeah, I can't remember the name they called them. They had a name for them. Like, I want to say Vikings, but that might not be the right word.
I mean, I can tell you, man, we were doing some incredible work, man. There were some great cops in that crew. And, it was real street work, man. It was corner jump outs. We were doing shift work, answering to a LAPD sergeant over there. And that's when I really saw it was the ATF guys who were the cowboys, right? Those were the guys who all the locals, all the real cops respected and looked up to. Those were the guys who were always in the mix, the cowboys who were out there doing the undercover work, working on the most violent trigger pullers in every city. And I knew, that's where I wanted to end up. I was working with these guys during the day and into the evening, and then partying with them at night. And, so it was a matter of time until, ATF, the problem was it's a very small agency and they didn't have openings very often.
Right.
So I had to bide my time. So I did a short 2-year stint with the U.S. Marshals back in New York and then Puerto Rico. And then ATF finally came open. They had an opening for agents, people like me who were already agents, just to come over. You didn't have to do the first half of the academy again and all that. Right. And, so as a Spanish speaker, I put in for, they give you 3 top choices: New York, LA, and Miami. Those are the 3 cities everyone wants to get out of, right? And that's where all the action is. So that's where I wanted to go. So they offered me a job in Savannah, Georgia, right? The wisdom of the government. But it, worked out because I got there my first day and I met my partner, and he was a lunatic and an undercover guy. So the first thing he did was he gave me, this is back when we still had cassettes, in our cars. He gave me like the best of Merle Haggard and the best of Waylon Jennings and David Allan Coe, right? And he said, all right, start listening to this. And he took me out the next day. I hadn't even been to the academy. I was doing an undercover deal with him, buying a gun from a convicted felon. And he started giving me his informants, and I hit the ground running. I started doing undercover before I went to the academy. Small, just getting my feet wet. An informant would introduce me to a gangbanger or a convicted felon, who had a gun to sell or an ounce of Coke or whatever it happened to be, and I would make the buy. And that is the best way to get into undercover work. I knew deep inside I wanted to eventually get into those long-term undercover infiltrations, but again, you got to pay your dues.
Yeah, you got to start somewhere. You got to pay your dues, right?
So I did that. Went to the ATF portion of the academy, got back to Savannah, and just hit the ground running, man. I was lucky. It was like all packaged for me because my partner, he was looking for help, and he got a guy who was ready to learn and ready to rock and roll, and we just tore it up, man. Street gangs. We were doing, some long-term. I'm going to call them infiltrations, even though we weren't trying to become, gang members with these guys, but we were becoming partners with them, making them part of our hustle. They knew we were gun traffickers, and we were always looking for guns, and we sold dope, and we're always looking for dope at a good price. So, that's how we kind of hit these guys from the outside. Just different members would start selling us guns, start selling us cocaine, heroin, meth, whatever it was. And, we were building cases, getting, not just quick hits as in, convicted felon with a gun or a dope sale, but we were showing their structure and getting RICO charges on these guys. Those kingpin statutes we were getting. And it was,
for people that don't know, the RICO statute, that's where you can actually take down a whole group of people, and that's kind of like it got famous by the mob, and Rudy Giuliani, took down the mob with that. But it goes after organizations like the Hells Angels or the Outlaws, or a group of people. You can kind of get everybody involved. What is the Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organization Act? Is what it stands for.
That's it. Yep. And so I wanted to get on that national stage with those guys, Jay Dobbins, Chris Bayless, the guys who were out there doing it. And so once I kind of got a reputation, I got the invite to come out there. And actually the first one I did was with Jay, my first case kind of on the national scene, where he brought out 3 guys on a case he had been working. It was a home invasion crew, and they were just into everything. They were pipe bombs. They had RPGs. They were into everything, kilos, just a criminal enterprise. And he told them he had his own crew, and we were setting up a big home invasion. He was going to bring us out. So it was pretty cool how we did it. He flew in one guy from LA, a guy named Babyface, guy Chrisser from Chicago. And then he flew in me from Georgia. And actually the bad guys actually picked us up at the airport. So we were in roll as we stepped off the airplane. Wow. And we did about 2 weeks out there. Again, and Jay had already done the hard part, the legwork. So we kind of had instant acceptance when we got out there, and just buying dope, buying pipe bombs, and setting up this big home invasion takedown at the end. And it just went really well. Here I'm watching these guys this is who I wanted to become, and now I'm working with them, right? So now I'm into it. There's no turning back now. Then I got a call to do a biker case, and I'm just going to tell you straight up, the biker case was not my thing. So, and I'll say this too, that it's kind of some Hollywood shit with the biker cases. It's glorified, but I've always maintained, I did 2 of them. If me and you got in a car and we drove all over this country, and we talked to every sheriff and every chief of police and every city and town in this country, and we asked them, what's the biggest problem in your jurisdiction? Not one of them would say outlaw bikers. They're not the problem in America, right? They're not the problem. When you go downtown, right, in a big city, you're not worried about outlaw bikers.
Right.
So, after doing 2 of those cases, I knew that that's not where I wanted to put my efforts. The first one I did was in Atlanta with the Outlaws motorcycle gang. Mm-hmm. And the only reason I got the call on that was because there was an ATF agent and a task force officer who were already undercover with these guys. And they got invited to go down they hadn't become patch members yet, invited to go down to Bike Week in Daytona with them. And the task force guy, who was a local sheriff, his department was like, you know what, now going to bike week with these guys, like we didn't really sign up for all this, and they pulled him out. So he needed someone, and I happened to be the only other guy in the Atlanta field division who worked undercover who had a motorcycle license. So, and the reason because I had like a Yamaha Virago when I was 17 years old in New York. I knew nothing about Harleys. I knew nothing about outlaw motorcycle gangs, but I had a license. So, and I never said no to any gig. Even on my way up there, driving from Savannah to Atlanta, I'm calling my buddy up in New York going, hey man, is it the same on a Harley when you shift? Is it one down and then three up? And like, that's how green I was, right? So, and the first thing I did, I met the two informants and my partner, the ATF guy, and we're in the North Georgia mountains, and they take off. It's raining. It's like a mist, and it's dark, and I've never been there before. And they give me this huge dresser, right? Big Harley. And, within a half mile on these twisty roads, I dumped it. I went down. And, so they were way ahead of me. When they finally figured out I wasn't behind them anymore, they came back. And the two informants, who were some hardcore dudes, they were like, this is the guy, you're asking us to take this guy into the Outlaws clubhouse.
That's who you're sending?
Yeah, he can't even ride a fucking Harley, right? So, but you know what? I picked that bike up with help. I picked that bike up and we bent everything back as good as we could, and I kept going. And at least they respected that, right? Because I was all banged up in blood. But I said, no, I can go, I'm good. So when I first went into that clubhouse, I didn't know what to expect. Like I said, I knew nothing about outlaw bikers. Where I grew up, it wasn't really an issue.
And now to clarify, you're saying outlaw bikers, but this was the Outlaws gang that you were infiltrating at this particular point in time, correct?
Yeah, the Outlaws motorcycle, MC.
Yep.
But yeah, when I say outlaw bikers, I'm talking about 1%ers.
Right. Yeah. As a whole. Yeah.
So, they brought me into the clubhouse the first time, and I'm a young guy still. I don't know, 23 years old, right? And I didn't say a word, man. Those places, if you've never been in a real, like a Hells Angels clubhouse or an Outlaws or Pagans clubhouse, it's an intimidating, those are intimidating places once you go inside, right? These guys, they don't play around. So I kept my mouth shut for the first 15, 20 minutes. Luckily, it wasn't really crowded. There was the president and about 6 members were there, me and my partner and our 2 informants. And, so it was a low key, thank God, it was kind of a low key atmosphere. And, I was introduced, kept my mouth shut, just kind of got the lay of the land. And after about 20 minutes, I just quietly walked up to the president and I said, listen, his name was Pierre. They never used their real names, right?
Right.
I said, man, again, I just want to introduce myself again. And I just want to tell you that I don't know your culture. I don't know your rules. And I certainly don't want to offend anyone or break any of the rules. I just want to learn. I want to be one of you, and I want to learn how, and I want to do it in a respectful way. And, so I just appealed to his ego, right? And these guys, he loved that, right? He saw this young, big dude who he could mold, he could use, and he just kind of took me under his wing after that point. He used to make me his green bean casserole all the time. I mean, it was terrible too, but I used to have to eat it. And, but that's how I approached it. And when it worked so well, I kind of used that for the rest of my career, because if, let's say I had gone in there trying to act like a big tough guy outlaw, motorcycle guy, they would have seen right through that, right? Oh, yeah. These guys are not stupid. They would have seen right through that.
And you probably got tested pretty quick too, and it put you in a situation where you had to do something to probably jeopardize your cover for sure.
Without a doubt. So, I took that lesson with me after that case, and I said, all right, I'm not going to roll in, and I never did, as a know-it-all tough guy. I'm going to sit back and see who I'm dealing with, and I'm going to make them want to be a part of my hustle. And that's how I did my whole career, right? If I'm infiltrating, when I was a Hispanic street gang or a black street gang or neo-Nazis or whatever, I'm not going to try and become one of them because I'm not. I'm an Italian guy from New York. That was my hustle, right? I had mob connections up there. So I moved guns. I could buy guns real cheap and move them up there and make a ton of money. I was a gun trafficker. That was my hustle. So, and when they saw that, and when they saw I had these avenues to move things, including dope, I made them want to be part of my hustle.
Yeah,
That,
they didn't care what your background was, and sometimes like that. Because at the end of the day, I think a lot of movies put it out, and I'm pretty sure there might be some that kind of stick by that. We only deal with our own people, but at the end of the day, a lot of those gangs, they go with whoever makes them money. The really color they give a shit about is green. It's not black, it's not white, it's not Hispanic.
What you just said, I say it all the time. The whole ideology, and Hollywood pushes that, right? That shit is out the window when you get to know these guys. None of them have an ideology. I don't care if it's Black Panthers or the Aryan Nation or the Latin Kings or the Gangster Disciples. They really don't give a shit. Can you make them money? They don't care what color you are, what race or religion. Can you make them money?
Yeah,
that's what they care about. And I appealed. I was a hustler. I appealed to that, and that was a big reason for the success that I was able to sustain for 2 decades, because I was just myself. I was just a hustler, and I was able to show them my hustle. Like when it came to the storefront operations I did in Georgia, we went to great lengths, man. Like I had moving trucks full of furniture and stuff, and I would show these guys. I would say, listen, so here's how I do it. Once I get like 100 or 150 guns, and it's worth my while and my money, to make a run up to New York. What I do is I hide them in the furniture, and I have a bill of lading. I have false paperwork, that I'm moving, this family from Atlanta up to New York. This is their stuff. So if Johnny Law pulls me over, hey man, I'm just moving the stuff. I'm just a truck driver.
And I got no idea how them AKs got in that couch. I don't know.
Exactly. And the bad guys were like, right on, dude. And then we had cartons of cases of cigarettes, like Newports and Marlboros, and we had hollowed out cases where you would open the top and you could pull out, these cases of Marlboros, and when you pulled them out, it looked underneath, it looked like there was a whole nother layer below, but that was actually hollowed out and reinforced, and you could fill it with like maybe 35 kilos of cocaine or meth or whatever, or 30 handguns, whatever it was. And we would show the bad guys this, and they would be like, man, right on, like they know what they're doing. And once they saw that, they got comfortable, and they would let me into their game, man. And that's what Undercover is, making people a part of your hustle, man.
Right. That's actually kind of cool that you're saying this, because I've launched an apparel line here recently, and one of the things that I've always said throughout life, because I've always been involved in this thing or that thing, nothing illegal, just, different types of hustles. A thing I've always said, and this applies even to a regular job. Like I've always said, the hustle never ends. And I just got this t-shirt today as part of my clothing line, and I'm going to be dropping it. We'll send you one for coming on the show for us.
Extra large.
Extra large. I got you. I don't know. You look like a 2X in there. You're a pretty big dude.
Yeah, I like them tight, man. I'm getting old,
One thing I want to talk about real quick before we get into the storefront things, because that's a really interesting thing too. And that time, I'm not sure if he's still around or what the timeline is exactly, but Outlaws was the big time guy, was a guy named Taco Bowman. Was he still around when you were there?
He was, yeah.
Did you ever run into him?
Never did. No.
Did you? I'm sure you probably heard some stories. Taco could be pretty damn ruthless from what I hear. Now, I don't know anything for sure. I'd never been involved with that. I never met him, but from the stories that I've heard, and I've heard George Christie, give his take on a few things and the wars that they had down there, they could be pretty ruthless.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm not in any way diminishing, the violence and the downright evilness of some of these outlaw bikers. Right. And I ended up, again, I did a case out in the San Diego area, El Cajon, on the Hells Angels a few years after that. It ended early because we ended up at the casino where there was a shootout between the Hells Angels and the Mongols.
That's in Laughlin?
Laughlin. Yep.
Yeah. I remember that. That was on TV, or not on TV, but they had it on closed camera, like everything. I don't know how the hell more people didn't get, no bystanders Didn't get killed in there.
I mean, everyone was on the ground. So I did that, and then one of my more bizarre cases I did up in Chicago on another outlaw who was also a member of the mafia, which they call the outfit.
Yeah,
up there.
yeah. The Chicago mob, as they call them, the outfit. Yeah.
And that was a crazy case, and there was no crime that this guy wasn't into. So and it was a part of my career, but I realized that those guys weren't the big problem in America, right? Like I said before, they weren't going downtown and sticking guns in people's faces.
Yeah.
Right. And robbing tourists and carjacking. Their violence was very contained for the most part into their own world. They would bomb each other's clubhouses, right? They would shoot and stab each other, but it was very contained. Whereas, what I saw, and call me corny, but I cared, right? And that's what I think makes the most effective law enforcement officers are men and women who actually care. And I did, man. I cared about these communities and making them safer. And I knew that taking crime guns off the street makes a community safer. If you get the guns out of the hands of the people who aren't supposed to have them, so that the only people who have guns are the people who are supposed to, the good citizens, you made that community safer. So, I kind of recognize that, the biggest problem, was more with the street gangs. Those were the trigger pullers. Those were the people who were making communities less safe. So I kind of went through these long-term infiltrations early in my career where, I did the biker cases. I did murder for hires. And I was working, different kinds of organizations. And I was always working toward what's the most effective thing I can do? How can I spend my time working undercover and be the most effective? And that answer just came to me one day by luck. I got a phone call from a guy in Augusta, Georgia, an ATF agent. He said, listen, we're going to do a storefront up here. The Richmond County Sheriff's Office, who are the police in Augusta, they have an informant who's a tattoo artist. And we want to do a storefront operation. He is flipped and he's going to cooperate. I didn't even really know what a storefront was. And I was like, I'll do it, because I never said no. So I went up to Augusta, got to know the informant, who was just nothing but trouble, but he was a really good informant. And man, it was insane, brother. The stories, the things that happened in there. But a year later, we had bought 430 crime guns off the streets of Augusta, Georgia, and we had torn through their gangs. They had national gangs there, man. Like, you see Augusta and you see the pageantry of the masters and all that crap. Man, Augusta's a gang-ridden city. It wasn't that
seem like that. I guess from maybe somebody passing through. Obviously, I've never lived there, but it doesn't seem like it would have that many criminal elements to it. I guess from the bystander.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't get over it. I didn't know it either. Again, 430 guns in less than 12 months.
Wow.
So my eyes were open, like, now ATF had never seen results like that. Really, there's no street operation had ever gotten results like this. Over 100 defendants, federal. Wow. Again, that just doesn't happen.
So let me ask you this. When you're getting all these convictions, are you having to go to court to testify with these things? Because obviously that would compromise your cover and then nobody would want to go back. Or are you able to not have to go in there and I guess be part of the case?
Well, first of all, no one is arrested until the end of the case.
Okay. So y'all would let it go and go and go.
So there might be, I might have bought a machine gun from a guy, right, in January. And let's say we take the case down in the next December. I might have not ever dealt with him. So he's free and clear, right? Running around for 11 months. And all of a sudden his door's getting kicked in and he's getting arrested on this indictment from 11 months ago.
Okay.
For operational security, no one ever got taken down until the very end.
Right. Okay.
And even then, I was able to avoid court. Well, a great thing about these storefront operations was because we were in control of the venue, we were able to set up our own cameras and microphones. So
You
the
got on tape.
evidence is really good, right? It was like watching television when you watch these. And, so I'm not in an alleyway. I'm not in some bathroom in a fast food restaurant, with some camera that's moving all over and bad audio. So there were very few trials because it's so hard to go to trial when you're on camera, getting out of your car, walking in, pulling guns out of your waistband. You got your felony convictions. How are you going to fight that? So very few trials.
Yeah, most lawyers are probably going to look at them and just tell them either take a plea or the hammer's going to drop. Just take what they give you, because, like you said, you can't fight those types of things. Yeah. Now, while you were doing all this, you obviously weren't using your real name. You were going by what, Sal Annunziato? Is that what it was?
Sal Annunziato. That was my undercover name for the last 15 years of my career. Yep.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. Most people that I've talked to continue to try to keep at least the same name or at least a close variation, because I would think if you're going here in Chicago and you're using one name, then California and using a name, and then back in Georgia and you got to keep it different, it'd be hard, I would think, to know which one to respond to sometimes.
Yeah, and with mine, I had gotten my undercover not just through the government, but through my own actions. I had gotten my backstopping. It was so deep. You could hire the best private detective in the world, and he's going to come back and tell you Sal Annunziato is a real guy.
Yeah.
From, not just the stuff the government does as far as, credit histories and Social Security and all that stuff, but, stuff that we would do on our own, from just simple things like magazine subscriptions and you name it, joining clubs. I was a member of the Italian Americans. Well, Sal Annunziato was. Right. All these societies and clubs and just everything that you in your normal life you kind of blow off. I would fill those out for Sal Annunziato. So, my backstopping, Sal was a real person, man.
Right.
And so, yeah, I didn't want to change because it would have been an uphill battle to come up with anything as good as that, because I've done so much work on it already.
Now, when you say backstop, for people that might not know exactly what that means, that's pretty much your backstory of your, I guess I would say character, but of your person, the guy you're portraying in these storefront operations. Because people, they might think, well, it's a biker gang, but when it comes to checking people out, they've got a lot of connections to find out really whatever the hell they want to. Don't be fooled, by just saying, oh, well, that's a biker gang. How much pull can they have? They can find out a lot of shit about you.
Yeah, I experienced that firsthand. When I went to California on the Hells Angels case, I had a different, I was Louis Tedesco. That was my undercover name. And I hadn't checked everything that the government had done. I was newer. I knew, I had a credit history, obviously, but I had never pulled it and looked at it. Well, when we showed up on the scene, me and my partner, one of the Hells Angels they had was actually a Century 21 real estate agent. And what do real estate agents have the ability to do?
Pull your credit, check into your finances.
You're right. And they did on us. And so, and once someone checks our undercover credit, ATF gets notified immediately. So they got notified immediately. So we were like, you know what? I want to see my credit, which I should have asked for before. And when I looked at my credit, Louis Tedesco my credit score was perfect. I had a Saks Fifth Ave, all this shit. I'm like, come on, man. I'm supposed to be a bad guy. And right? I'm going bikers and shit. And I got Saks Fifth Ave and I got great credit. So that was a learning point for me.
Right. Yeah, that's something that most people wouldn't think about going into that sort of thing. I got to have your credit right. That's just something that, might slip by the average person that would think that would be needed to be taken care of going into these types of situations. But like you said, that's just how far they will go to make sure you are who you say you are.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. A lot of the organized crime, even a lot of these street gangs are now organized crime.
Yeah.
And, they have assets and, they have their own investigative capabilities, man. They have PIs on retainer
Yeah.
And they will check people out for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it because it's happened to me.
Yeah. So these storefront operations, now you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but it kind of, these things are that way within organized crime. They have fronts that launder money and stuff like that. Obviously not with the backing of the ATF, but they might have a quote unquote pool hall or social club or tattoo shop. And it very well may function as that, but there's also a lot of backdoor room activity. So it seems like what the basis of this was, y'all kind of just was able to mimic that. Obviously, they just don't know it's being backed and funded and recorded and documented all by the ATF.
Hey, but we didn't invent the wheel, man. We stole it.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, they've been doing that for forever. And,
Yeah.
You know, ATF, we didn't come up with the storefront concept in law enforcement either. You know, like NYPD and LAPD were doing these like kind of pawn shop storefront things back in the 60s and 70s.
Right.
You know, those were mainly just to disrupt fencing operations, stolen merchandise.
Okay.
So what we did was we took it and we brought it to a whole new level.
Right.
You know, and that is what my book really is about. My book centers on these 4 storefront operations that I conducted in Georgia and the evolution of these storefronts. It went from a very street level storefront, very successful in Augusta, where again, 430 crime guns off the streets and 100 defendants plus, to a very, you know, we went through an evolution. And the last one we did, I was a freight forwarder. We were an importer exporter, freight forwarder on the port, at the port. And we actually did ship goods to Colombia. Wow. And we were driving Jaguars and Mercedes, and we had upped our game. And now we were into organized crime. We had organizations that we were dealing with, criminal organizations in Bolivia, in Colombia, Central America. And we had stepped up our game. And you know how you could really tell is when you look at what we call the glory table. You know, so at the end of the operation, you know, the bosses make you take all the guns out of evidence and put them on the table for the for the press. And so so that all my bosses the bigwigs, I'm talking about the guys up, you know, in Atlanta and above, you know, the ones who had thrown marbles in my way throughout the whole operation, right, and done everything they could to ruin it, so that they could get up to the podium and pound their chest and say they're not going to let illegal guns on their streets. Well, anyway, we would have to put all the guns on the table for those guys. We call it the glory table, you know, for the press photos and all that. Well, if you look at the ones, the 430 from the Augusta one, you know, it's handguns, it's pistols, you know, like Saturday Night Specials, you know, cheap Lorsons and high points.
Oh man,
they're stolen guns. Those. Now you look at the glory table for our last one when we were freight forwarders, and there's some serious guns on the table there, right? I'm talking about like some really high quality AR-15s, machine guns, those type of guns. So again, just a different level of criminals, but criminals nonetheless.
Right, definitely stepping up the game there. Now, I gotta think that it's almost impossible to not necessarily get infatuated with that life, because obviously people say sometimes it's like, oh, well, that guy, you know, he was a rat. You're not a rat, you're a cop, you're doing your job. But at normal, you know, the normal thinking, you've got to enjoy that to a certain extent, being able to ride around in the Jaguars, much like the guy you talked about in the beginning of the episode. You see him pulling up in the Corvette, and like you're on another level. And I mean, I talked to Jay about it, and he said the same thing. You enjoy that type of, you know, lifestyle. You know, I want to say, I guess, fear that he was kind of talking about how, you know, you could just tell you walked through, you were wearing that cut, or you rode through, you were feared. You could tell, and that was contagious. And you kind of fed off that. Did that ever happen with you in your career and everything that you were doing?
I mean, it lasted for years and years. It's addictive.
Yes.
It was addictive for me. You know, and Jay and I have talked about this a lot. A lot of guys who, you know, to me, they're probably the smart guys. They'll work undercover. They'll do their damage, and they'll get a good 4 or 5 years, and they walk away. They go on to something else. They'll go to K-9 unit or whatever. Dummies like me and Jay, we can't stop. But here's the way we looked at it. You know, after 4 or 5 years, when you walk away, you're walking away. You just like, I mean, you just got all your skills. I mean, you're hitting on all cylinders after that. Now you're ready, and that's how I felt. I was like, man, I'm getting better and better here. And it was contagious. We had this healthy competition. I don't know if it was very healthy, but it was a competition with guys like me and Jay and all these guys around the country, who you would hear, that, this guy in Chicago just wrapped up his case and he got 40 defendants. He bought, 100 kilos of heroin. He got 50 guns or whatever. And there would be two feelings, right? One feeling of pride, because that's one of your guys, man, that's your team. And then that other feeling of, oh man, I can do better than that.
Yeah.
Right. I could do better than that. And, that would motivate us then to go out and top him. And so it was a competition almost, although there was nothing but love there between us, but there was competition. I wanted to get people to hear about my next big gig, right? And how many guns I got. So what gets lost in all that and what gets left behind in all that are your priorities, right? Your faith, your family, your friends. That's what gets lost in all that. But you get to the point where that's no longer as important as what you think you're doing. You think you're saving the world,
right?
And there's gonna come a point of reckoning, and it has for all of us. It really did for me. At some point, you're gonna have to face that.
Well, now you mentioned, faith and family. Were you married at the time?
I was.
Okay.
I was. Yeah, I got married. Then I had kids, and it was right when I was running. I'd be in California, for 5 months, come back. I'd tell my family I'm going to slow it down. And then I'd get a phone call and I'd be in Chicago. Or, I'd be doing a storefront in Brunswick, right? Which is only an hour and a half away, but it doesn't matter. If you're not home, you're not home. Whether you're in California or Brunswick, Georgia, you're not there.
Yeah.
So yeah, we are all type A personalities, and we have that one characteristic that we seem to all share, is that we just ran everything into the ground, and our personal lives were on the forefront of that.
Right. There's a movie that I'm sure most people have seen, and I think it kind of embodies a lot of what you guys go through. It's about the mob, but it's Donnie Brasco. It's got Johnny Depp, Al Pacino, Michael Madison. It's a really great film based on a true story. Joe Pistone. And you can see as he's doing this, he started it out with the best intentions. And then he befriends a guy in the group named Lefty, which was played by Al Pacino. And then the more it goes, you can see where he'll go home, but then he can't wait to get back to what he's doing. And not necessarily that he's enjoying it, which I think a part of him is, but that case or that, particular mission that he's on, it kind of takes over and takes priority of the family. And you can see that disconnect even with his wife throughout the movie. She says in like a therapy session, she's like, I didn't marry a gangster. I married you. I married the person. And that seems to be kind of what every movie after that's went after. And there's also those fine lines to where you develop relationships with some of the people that you're eventually going to have to put in jail. A lot of movies have kind of touched upon that. The Fast and the Furious, the original one, was kind of like that. Point Break, in a way, was kind of like that. Did you ever have anyone that you became attached to that, you hated that when that time was going to come, you was going to have to put them away?
Man, I did a whole documentary on this. The second storefront we did was in a small city, Statesboro, Georgia. We called it Statesboro Blues. We didn't really have high hopes going into it. It's such a small town, but they were having home invasions, armed robberies, drug dealing out of control. So, we agreed. The chief of police had asked us to do it. We went in there and did it. So we kind of had a little bit of a slow start. So there was a young lady we were buying pills from, and she approached me one night and said, "Listen, my boyfriend sells crack cocaine. you guys into that? And I said, well, if you can give me a good enough deal, I said, send him in here. I'll check him out. So she sent this guy in there. His name was Petey, and he was a pleasant guy, right? Nice guy to deal with, very pleasant. So I ended up buying a large amount of crack from him. He was a multi-convicted felon, and the federal crack statutes were brutal. He had bought himself 20 years already.
Was that the third strike law type thing that was going against him? That's mandatory 20, right, on third strike.
Yeah. So we didn't even have to deal with him anymore, right? Usually we would just cut someone off at that point, because it's just a waste of taxpayers' money to keep buying dope from him.
Right.
So she came back a few days later, and she said, listen, Petey really needs, I know you guys liked him. Things seem to go well. He knows what's going on here. She said, he needs a job, as a condition of his parole, he has to be employed. Would you guys hire him? And, we all looked at each other. We were like, wow, that is an opportunity right there, because, we were new in town. We're out of towners, we're putting ourselves out here as criminals. We had kind of a slow start. Now, if we get one of their own, right, a guy from the community who they all know, who's been in and out of prison, instant credibility for us, right?
Yeah.
Make our job a lot easier.
You probably cut 2 or 3 months off of trying to work your way in.
Right. Now, it's also going to make our jobs a lot harder, because this is a long-term undercover operation, right? Right on the other side of the wall from where he'll be sitting, is a cover team with guns and, running computers, running license plates and computer and criminal histories and the whole deal. It's an undercover operation. We actually shared a back door. We had put it out as a tax preparation office, which, so the door was always locked and there was never anyone there. So it would make it more difficult. And then we could never come out of roll, right? Because he's going to always be there. Long days, 10-hour days.
Yeah, you got to constantly stay in character, right. I would say, yeah.
Which is tiring. So we decided to do it. And, it ended up being a huge mistake, big mistake in my career. So he started working there, and, he knew what was going on there. He knew what we were all about. And he actually started, not only did he work the register, and he started helping us. He helped us in ways that he didn't even know about, by identifying some of these guys that were very hard to identify, right? A guy would come in, sell us a sawed-off shotgun, give us some street name. He'd be dropped off in some car that didn't come back to, a rental or whatever it was, right? So he'd give us some name, and Petey would say when he left, oh man, that's so-and-so. He lives down on so-and-so. We'd be like, thank you. And then he started negotiating for us. Our mission was to never let a gun walk. Guys would come in with these guns and want some ridiculous price, right? For a high 0.9 millimeter, they'd come in and they'd want $700,
Jeez.
Right? Which you could, at that time, you could go buy one for $110.
I know, that's what I was saying. High point, Jesus.
So, we couldn't pay that kind of money for a gun, because for many reasons, right? First of all, we lose all credibility.
Yeah.
That's what cops do. And it's, you're almost on the brink of an entrapment defense if you're going to pay that much money for something that's worth so little.
Right.
So, that's where negotiations and your undercover skills would come in. Well, Petey would jump in. He would jump in almost like you were at a car dealership, right? And he was like the manager you'd have to refer to. And he'd pull the guy aside and say, listen, man, he's moving these guns in New York. He takes all the risk. He's got to make a profit. Like, he heard my spiel that I would give guys, and he would give it to him for me. And, because we never let a gun walk, because if I had a chance to get that gun out of this guy's hands, and it was a crime gun, if I failed and he goes back out on the street and that gun gets used in a crime, in a murder or something, that's on me, right? Because I had a chance to get it. So he was a huge help in that aspect. And above and beyond that, we all started to like him. He was a good guy. He was funny. He was pleasant. He brought down the tension. Because, you get a bunch of type A undercover guys. Eventually, people aren't getting along. Petey was like a breath of fresh air, man. yeah, we would have deep talks with him about life, about all sorts of shit. And, you know, he was an insightful guy. You know, he came from where he came from and he was what he was. But we all started to really like him. And on top of that, he thwarted 2 armed robberies in that store. Guys we were dealing with during the day we had dealt with on multiple occasions, selling us dope, selling us guns, turned out to be the same guys coming back at night with ski masks to rob us.
Yeah, that happens a lot. If they think you're holding on something, they'll go there, sell it to you, so they know you either have the product or the cash to buy it, so they'll come back later on and rob you. That happens quite a bit.
You know, they knew what was going on. They knew we were cash heavy. They even knew we always had guns on us because we made sure that wasn't a secret that we always had guns because we wanted to avoid that situation. But you know, some of these guys, especially the young ones, that you know, they'll test you.
Yeah, they don't care.
So on 2 occasions, these guys came rolling in. You know, the masks, the guns, bags, and Petey, he recognized them. He jumped up. You know, we're all taking our guns out, ready to go. We're like, oh, this operation's over, man. You know, we're about to get in a shootout with these guys. And Petey put himself in between them and us and talked them down. So listen, you don't want to do this. You do not want to do this, and talked them right out that door.
Wow.
So by the end of the operation, you know, we're shooting pool with them in between deals and shooting the shit, laughing, cutting up. And we're all looking at each other eventually, and we're like, wow, this guy he's going to do 20 years at the end of this. We're going to go on to our next case and move on. He's going to prison for 20 years. He's become a part of the operation. And he's going, you know, he's going to have a very different ending than we are. And there came a point when we were playing pool, and it was me and my 2 undercover partners and Petey. And he kind of stopped the game and he looked at us and he goes, man, I just want to tell you guys something. He goes, I just want to tell you guys that you're the first white people that I've ever trusted in my whole life, man. I love you guys. And dude, you know, and my heart dropped into my stomach, man. You know, I didn't know what to say. Even the cover room guys were choked up on that one. So that was difficult, man. We tried, you know, we went to the U.S. Attorney's office, tried to see if he could not be charged, but there was no stopping it at that point. So I did not want to face him in court. I didn't ever want to see him again. You know, they made the decision to arrest him before everyone else. They put him in the county lockup. He actually tried to hang himself in the lockup unsuccessfully, thank God. And then the next day they bring in all the others, right? They had this mass roundup. They bring in 75 other guys. And we hadn't really thought this one out very good either. So now these guys are coming in. Like I said, maybe this were guys that I dealt with 5 months ago, but now they're all coming in, talking to each other and figuring out this was an undercover operation, right? We're undercovers. And they see the guy who was behind the desk with us negotiating deals. So of course they're going to think he's a rat, right? He's a snitch. So now, you know, luckily they got him separated and all that. You know, I went to his sentencing, and the U.S. Attorney's Office decided they would put me up on the stand so I could at least ask the judge to give him a downward departure. And I went up there on the stand and I laid out everything he had done for us, all the help he had given us. And that old federal judge looked at me and he goes, I'll tell you what, he goes, this defendant was not helping you because you're a law enforcement officer. He was helping you because he thought you were a gangster just like he is. 20 years. Yeah.
Damn.
So that was a tough one, man. That really changed things for me and made me start looking at things a little bit differently.
Did you have any communication with him that day in the courtroom at all?
No.
Probably, I imagine that had to be real hard probably didn't even want to really look him in the eye, to be honest.
I did not. You know, I had a similar situation up in Chicago with the guy who I was telling you about, who was the outlaw biker and the mafia guy. You know, same thing. I had spent a year with this guy. And for the takedown, they asked me to lure him into a hotel room at the Hilton at the O'Hare Airport in Chicago. And he thought he was going there to meet Hoist Gracie, the famous MMA
UFC fighter, yeah.
And that was my cover. I was a kind of a down and out MMA fighter, like a punching bag. That was my cover. And in reality, I was going to bring him in that room, and he was going to meet all the ATF and FBI agents who had all the evidence in cardboard boxes in the hotel room. You know, they thought they were going to sit him down and try and get him to flip. And I knew from being with this guy for a year, there's no way this guy's flipping. So they start talking to him, and he showed up with his kid, you know, who I had seen a lot and spent time with. And he was a good dad. I mean, he was a piece of shit, but he was a good dad. And so he wouldn't believe it. He wouldn't even really say anything to him. He wouldn't believe that I was who they said I was. So they come back to me in the other room and they said, listen, you got to go in there. You got to show him your badge, prove it, see if you can get him to talk. And I was like, I don't want to, right? I do enough, you know, I don't want to.
Yeah. That's like turning the knife a little deeper, you know?
Right, exactly. I never enjoyed that moment of burn. A lot of guys did, but I did not. I didn't want to be around. I would avoid takedowns and all that at all costs. So I went in there and, you know, I took my badge out, showed him, and I told him, I said, listen, man, you know, I'm just doing my job. I said, this was not personal. And he was like, wait, stop. He hadn't said anything, but he looked up at me, he goes, stop. He goes, do not tell me this was not personal. He said, you know, I took you in. He goes, you've met my family. You know, I took you into my inner circle. You spent time at my house with my people. Everything you've said to me up to this point has been a lie. So don't tell me that this isn't personal. I had no comeback for that. Right? What do you say? I had no comeback. So to answer your question, that's a long version, but yeah, that's happened to me on a bunch of occasions.
Yeah, I mean, and the fact that what you said, that he didn't even believe that you were undercover, kind of puts a stamp on your body of work, because it was hard for him to fathom that you were doing that. They needed you to walk over there. And the same thing, it was kind of similar to the Donnie Brasco when the cops went there to that place, and like, you know, the man you know as Donnie Brasco is really Agent Joe Pistone, and they laid out all these photos. Even seeing the photos, they didn't believe it. And that's kind of similar in that, where he's telling you, hey, the guy, you know, this way, it's all been a setup. And he's like, nah. I mean, he thinks they're bullshitting.
Yeah.
Wow. A few other things I wanted to get to, and we'll wrap this up because we're closing in on an hour here. With these kinds of things that you've done, these storefront operations, the life of undercover, there's going to be times to where you're pretty close to either being found out or cover being blown, or you have that one guy that just can smell that you're a cop no matter what you do. I haven't ever interviewed him, but Billy Queen, when they interviewed infiltrated the Mongols, he said there was this one guy named Red Dog that just fucking knew he was a cop from minute one and never let up from the first time he met him to the time the bus went down. He just knew it. And Jay said he had someone similar in the Angels that just, no matter what he did, that guy just always said cop. Did you ever have anybody like that in your run-in?
I did. The reason I laugh when you say that about Billy is that he, you know, we went out there for the takedown out to California on the Mongols case. And so, you know, he picked a bunch of us who had done outlaw biker cases to be there and to do the interviews. And we did the interviews like in the basement of the Pasadena jail, and it was almost like dungeon rooms down there. And so he had asked if me, and I was real big back then.
You're not exactly small now.
Yeah, I was a lot bigger. And then a big old boy from Fargo, North Dakota office could interview Red. And, you know, he had told us, you know, obviously this was way before the book and all this, but right. He had told us what he had told you about how Red had treated him. And he had really treated Billy like shit, man. There was almost abuse, almost, you know, I don't know if that's the right term for an undercover guy, but
right.
So, you know, we knew his temperament, Red, and all that, and what was going on. And when we started to interview him, I'll just say he was easily provoked.
Yeah.
what I'm saying. And it did, it turned there was, all I'll say is we got a little bit of revenge for Billy during that interview.
Wow. So you actually got to quote
In
unquote
self-defense.
Yeah, self-defense.
Absolutely. But
Wow.
anyway,
That's crazy.
yeah, you know, and I did have that. When my partner and I went out to El Cajon on the Hells Angels, El Cajon, California, there was a guy, his name was Pete. He was a redhead. He was a Hells Angel who just wasn't buying our shit from day one. Was not. Now we had, you know, a couple of guys who were very loyal to us but this guy, you know, he's the kind of guy you want in your club, right? He was that guy who, he was suspicious of everything and everybody. And I in particular remember being in, you know, the Hells Angels had a bar out there. It was called Dumont's Tavern. That was their bar. They owned it. And you couldn't drink liquor. The city, it wouldn't give them a liquor license. So it was only beer and wine. I remember a conversation that my partner and I had with Pete. He sat down at the table with us and started talking about undercover infiltrations. And he said ATF like 3 times during that conversation. And, you know, I mean, whoever even brings up ATF in conversation, right? We're not a well-known agency at all, you know? And I remember after that, he left and my partner looked at me and he goes, that guy knows who the fuck we are. He goes, how does he not know who the fuck we are right now? That's just how he was, man. He never bought it from the beginning. And when, you know, when that case crumbled, I mean, we had put in time and we had it going really good, right? You know, we went out with them out to the Laughlin thing. And then when the shootout happened, the agency, for our safety, pulled us out for a few weeks, which destroyed our case, because these guys always want to know where you're at, what you're doing. Yeah. And an unexplained absence with these guys, that doesn't fly. So when they finally let us back, it was over, man. It was done. And you know, so a bunch of them were arrested just from whatever we had done at that point. But that guy Pete, he actually said, I think during his interview, that he knew the whole time we were ATF agents. There was no doubt in his mind, and he did. I mean, he practically said it to us at that table at the bar, which is not a good feeling.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
Surrounded by these guys, you know.
Yeah, unexplained absence, especially right after that. For people that don't know, that biker, that war that you're talking about, I say war, that big fight in Laughlin, that sparked a huge war between the Mongols and the Angels. So when a situation like that, everybody's on high alert. You want to know where everybody is, not necessarily to make sure they're not ATF, but just to make sure everybody's accounted for, that you're not losing people. And like you said, if you take a 3-week hiatus, that's the first thing you're going to think of. You know, we're at fucking war here. We got your shit's really hitting the fan and you decide to fucking disappear for 3 weeks. That's going to be a dead giveaway that something higher than you pulled you out of there.
Yeah. What made it worse was that the angel we had gone up there with, after the shootout, he gave his Glock 9 to our informant who we were with and said, hey man, give this back to me when we get back to San Diego, right? Because he knew there was going to be roadblocks all the way, right? And there was. So now we got this guy's gun. He just used it in a shootout, right? He's a convicted felon, and now we have his gun. So you can't give the gun back to him, right?
Yeah.
That's evidence, right? It's evidence and possibly in a murder. So we had to come up with a story when we were finally allowed to go back as to what happened to his gun. And we said, listen, man, we were scared. There were roadblocks. So we broke it down and we just threw it out in the desert. We were done at that point. Yeah, that was it. So.
Well, Lou, you've got a lot of interesting stories, man. And something tells me that we're only just scratching the surface. Now that poster behind you, that is your book right there, correct?
Oh yeah.
Well, tell our listeners where they can pick that up from, what kind of platforms it's available on, and things like that.
The best and easiest way to do it is to go right on Amazon. If you just Google Storefront Sting, the name of the book is Storefront Sting, an ATF Agent's Life Undercover. And it really covers the evolution of these 4 storefronts that I did. So different undercover teams, different problems, different solutions. So it starts out like we talked about with a tattoo shop and just some insanity that went on there. And then just gang fights inside, just insanity. Then we kind of stepped our game up and went more to the retail side of a head shop. So a real kind of a high-end shop that sold paraphernalia, drug test kits,
bongs, scales, stuff like that. Yeah.
The stuff you drink to flush your system out, all that kind of stuff. We had Xbox and PlayStation, pool table, and all that. And again, then that was also in a college town, and we started getting guys coming in like these kind of frappy headed frat boy guys, and they're selling us fentanyl patches and shit I'd never even heard of back then and stuff. And they were doing B&Es at CVS's, and they I don't know if they wanted to impress us, if they were just stupid, but they started confessing to it, telling us, all on camera, right? And so that was our second one, and it went really well. And so we decided to do our third one as a military surplus store with a gun range attached to it. We had a 3-lane gun range attached to this military surplus store. Really cool setup. Convicted felon gangbangers like on camera, and they're shooting like this. It was really, we were going after the guns. We got over 250 guns.
That's really genius to set that have a gun range in there. That's like inviting them to come in there to try out their guns or whatever. That's pretty damn smart.
ATF was not crazy about that idea. I don't know how I snuck that through, but I did. And then for the fourth one, we really picked our game up. That's when we became freight forwarders, and that's when we got into organized crime. That's when we got into the biggest stolen car ring on the Eastern Seaboard, and we stole that case right out from under the FBI, which was one of the great pleasures of my career. And we locked up major players in that. Like I said, South American gun traffickers, the guys who were into, just multiple kilos and you name it. They were stealing Lexuses from New York and shipping them to Bolivia.
Wow.
So that's what the book is about. It's about the evolution of these, and it's about the crash ending, and how, they're not done anymore. And, kind of my career crashed as these storefronts crashed. And it just kind of tells that story. It's a good read. It's a fast read. I've gotten calls from guys like Jay Dobbins and all the people I work with who said, listen, there's no other book like this. It's not the story of some tough guy undercover, who does his job and rides off on his Harley into the sunset, man. It's a story about a guy who succeeded and made it to the top of his profession, lost his priorities, and crashes and burns. Lost a lot more than just his priorities, and then kind of had to rebuild. So it's a different story, and I will tell you, it's been optioned by a company out in Hollywood for a Netflix series.
Well, that's what I was about to say. The way you were breaking that down, it sounded like to me you had a really good, at least 4 seasons worth of content there.
Yep. And I went out, they made me a subject matter expert on storefront operations. So they had me go out to about 15 other storefronts all over the country and help these guys kind of set up and get established. And I jumped in and did some of the undercover for them. And, so yeah, they're interested in making a series with different casts for each season being a different storefront. Right. And Hollywood works really slow. I found that out. Oh, yeah. But we're and they're not excuse me, they don't send checks very often either. I learned that too. They want everything, but they don't send you any checks.
Yeah.
But hopefully that'll happen. And I'm dealing with all that now. but the more, the more people that buy the book and read it, the better it will make everything. So I'd ask all your listeners, if you can, it's a $19.99 on Amazon, Storefront Sting. I guarantee you'll enjoy it, man.
Okay. Is there an Audible version of it?
No, there's a Kindle. There is not an Audible yet. Hopefully, I plan on reading it, so hopefully there will be.
Yeah, that'll be good. I think I don't think Jay's on Audible. I believe Billy's was on Audible. A lot of what people are going to these days is Audible because it's some people have the time to sit down and read through a book. A lot of people listen to them like in their cars and stuff like that. So I try to tell people Audible, man, that's a huge market right now for the Amazon side. So that would probably definitely be good. But either way, if it's a good fucking book, you're going to make the time to read it, on your free time. And I think this will be one that our listeners will really enjoy. Matter of fact, when we post this episode, I'm going to put the direct link to it on the show notes. That way, all they have to do is just click and they can go right to your book. Do you have any other things in the work? Do you have a podcast yourself? How can, if our listeners wanted to follow along with you and possibly see when you get this TV deal, where would they go to do that?
So I got a website that's should be up next week. It's just my name, louvaloze.com, LOUVALOZE.com, where you can buy the book. And we have so I'm going in the t-shirt business along with you. I have a shirt. It says Undercover Life with our logo. It's like a pistol demon kind of logo with a skull and a gun. And there's also some other videos I've done with the guys from Narcos, Steve Murphy and Javier Pena, that are available in a package on the website. And I'm available for speaking engagements. I'm actually doing one with Joe Pistone and the Narcos guys out in Southern California, gang investigation conference. I'm doing two with the Narcos guys, doing one in Vegas next month with those guys. So yeah, I got a great presentation I do. It's about a 2 or 3 hour presentation with videos and pictures and the whole deal about my whole ordeal. And that's basically what I got going on, brother.
Well, that's good, man. If, like I said, if any of our listeners are around there, definitely go out and check this out. I mean, I think it would be fantastic, and I'm glad you was able to come on the show. I'm always intrigued in these type of cases, man, and the trials and tribulations that come along with it, because you're doing the right thing, but it's kind of like you're being tempted by everything that makes that life glamorous to the people that are in it. So it's kind of like you have to still remember what you're doing it for, but it's like you're just tempted with everything thrown in your face, and it blurs that line. And for people to make it out the other end, you had a lot go on, you had to sacrifice a lot, but you have a hell of a story to tell after it's over. And that's what we've kind of covered here today. And I certainly appreciate you coming by the show and giving us a little insight into you and who you are and what you're about.
Well, I appreciate it, brother. Hey, real quick, let me give you my Charleston connection.
Absolutely.
So when right after I retired in 2017, I went up to Charleston, North Charleston, and I learned how to become a distiller at the Striped Pig Distillery in North Charleston.
I know
great group of guys up there. And I did almost a full year up there with those guys, learning how to become a distiller.
Wow.
Awesome crew up there.
Yeah, they've got a few distillers around here. I've made my way through a good many of them. So next time you come back down here to Charleston, man, hit me up for sure.
Roger that, brother.
All right, man. I appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Hollywood Wade. That was Lou Valoze. And unfortunately, we are out of time. Tune in next week on an all new episode of Crime and Entertainment. Lou, we appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you, brother.